my computer. So here we go, and welcome everyone. I'm just going to I'm just trying to get my computer to record my from speaker view, but for some reason it's recording. Okay, so I'm just playing around with this a little bit to start with. So I was hoping just to have it a certain way, but anyway, it's recording. So thank you, and let's just do a blessing to each other to start. So I love you, I bless you, and I honour you, and thank you for joining in. And the reason why that little blessing came through was, if you read the course, it says lots of ways through the course to bless your brother, to honour your brother, and to love your brother. And I became aware, I was sort of given that blessing by Jesus as a way to incorporate those different aspects of what he was asking us to do, to see truly, to see our brother truly. So for some reason, when I go to speaker view on my computer, it brings up the Awakening Together little video. So I'll have to do this, record this video with everyone on the screen. So I just want everyone to know that if you have your video on, Ruby, your video is on, just that I'm recording this and I will be putting it up on my YouTube channel. So I'm not sure whether you want to be recorded. I just thought I'd let you know. Yeah, okay. So you can still see me. And it just helps with, you know, sometimes it's easier that way. All right. Okay, so I'm playing around with this, and so at the moment, so let's just drop into a prayer, just so that my mind can shift from it trying to be looking at how to get this to work, to drop into God's mind, which is the only mind we have. So, Holy Spirit, you be in charge. You are my right mind. You are the mind in which I think, in which I have my being, in which everything occurs. You are the right mind, the one mind. And I enter you now, and I remain there. I drop in. And in fact, I can't drop out. That's just not true, that I can drop away from the truth. I can be unaware of it, but I can't ever be free. My one open, awakened mind is always there. So, amen. So it just brings me to a place where I realise the truth. So Joanne, okay, so Joanne's turned her video off, that's good. Now, just so you know, if this recording is going up onto my YouTube channel and the names that are appearing on the screen won't appear on the recording, so just so that you're okay with that, and that's just, you can safely listen in, and you are safe. You're always safe. So today I'm going to do a recording around special relationships, but there's lots of teachings in the Course in Miracles around special relationships and holy relationships, and it seems to be the way Jesus is helping us to awaken. He uses our relationships with others to awaken us. And in my journey, I've got 2 children, a son and a daughter in this lifetime, and parents. My parents are still alive, so-called alive, and because we're eternal in truth. So I'm talking about the level of this world and how we awaken. So I've somehow, Jesus has been using me in this lifetime to help parents that have children on drugs or alcohol problems or psychiatric problems, which is only ego. So we're talking about the ego in our children, but in the ego's world, it gets put into categories of, oh, your child's a drug addict, your child is an alcoholic, your child has manic depression, your child has psychosis, your child has antisocial behaviour, your child has. So there's lots of ways the ego categorises itself in this particular dream, and this dream is the ego's dream. And we're going to go past the ego's dream to the happy dream, which is where we're living in the Holy Spirit's mind, and we're aware that it's a dream, and we use everything in this dream to have our mind awakened. So the Holy Spirit will help us awaken, and this is why the Course in Miracles is different to other teachings, is because it uses this sense of the Holy Spirit, that it says that you have a guide in your mind. You don't have to pay a psychologist or a therapist. You actually have a therapist, and it's free, and all you need to do is get quiet enough in your mind to hear it and invite it in, and invite it and believe in it. You have to develop trust in the Holy Spirit, and the more you trust it, and how you can know that you're hearing the Holy Spirit can sometimes speak through others. The Holy Spirit will use everything in this world to teach you about truth and who you truly are and who everyone else is. So when we come into this world and we're born as a body, we're given parents, and we're given our relationships, and the script is written. So our script of our life is written, and we go through it. So we're in a script. We're literally like a movie or a live play, and we're the actor in the script, and we get to play our part. And when we are coming from the ego mind, now there's only 2 thought systems you can use in this script. The script is, you can either use the ego or the Holy Spirit. Hi, Regina. She's just joined. And so the Course in Miracles is a way to awaken, and it uses certain ways of teaching us, and initially it's probably advisable not to mix the Course in Miracles with any other teaching, because it has its own way, it has its words, it has meanings on particular words, and you really need to understand what those words mean so you can get to the practical part of the course. So say with the word atonement, a lot of times in other teachings it can mean at-one-ment, but in the Course in Miracles it means correction, and the correction is the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit, the word the Holy Spirit needs to even be understood. What is the Holy Spirit? It is part of our awakened mind that is in touch with, understands where we are believing a false thought system, and it's ready and available to correct us, but it's waiting on us to ask for correction. So, and then the way to know that the Holy Spirit has given you an answer is to know how you feel. You'll feel this truth. You'll feel, you'll have just this idea that, yes, this is truth. So as you're doing the lessons of A Course in Miracles, sometimes the Holy Spirit can use the lessons to bring truth to illusions. So this week my topic is about I'm talking about special relationships, and you can apply what I'm saying today, what I'm going to be reading part of the course, but I'm really putting this teaching to you as a parent or you as a partner. But mainly you can use it to apply to anyone. But it just seems that I meet a lot of people that have problems with their children. And it seems to me that this is where Jesus has me teaching a lot to parents. Now, on my YouTube channel, I have done I've done a recording, and it's called, well, I can't remember the exact name of the recording, but it's something around, do you have a child on drugs? And I seem to have been doing a lot of one-on-ones with people that their children are on drugs and they're really upset. And I've had, it seems that nearly every person that's been mine that's come to me and been attracted to me, it's always ended up that the special relationship has been a child that has either had alcoholism, psychiatric problems, drug addiction, or violence or anger and those sort of things. So I haven't done a video about this for a while, and I felt called, prompted by the Holy Spirit to share about this again today. So as I said, I'm going to be talking about you as a parent with your child that is a drug addict. Now, your child could have an eating disorder, they could have anorexia, they could have bulimia. It's all the same. But I'm just going to be using those words, but it can be applied across the board. I'm going to be reading some of the Course in Miracles, and I'm going to be showing you how to put into practice, or how to see through Jesus's words, through this understanding of working with your child and how to help your child, how to truly help them. So let's get into it. Now, I'm reading from the new version of the Course in Miracles, which is the Circle of Atonement. It's the purple book. If you haven't got it, it doesn't really matter because it'll be in the other versions. And because I'm in chapter 9, pretty much by the time you get to chapter 9, in all versions, they're very similar. The changes in this version are mainly around the first 5 chapters. So I'm going to be reading from chapter 9, section 3, the correction of error. And so keep in mind, if you have a child on drugs or a child that you're having difficulty getting along with, this is this is Jesus directly pointing us to how to help our child and ourselves, our own mind, healing our own mind. So our main point in the Course in Miracles is about accepting the atonement for yourself. It's never about trying to come to the Course in Miracles and get anyone else to correct their mind. So it asks us to give up trying to help anyone else and have our own mind corrected through the right-minded thought processes that the Holy Spirit brings in. And then, so we go from the wrong mind to the right mind, and then it talks about God taking the final step but God really doesn't take steps. So what happens is the last part is the one mind, and that one mind is just an awakened mind, and that just happens naturally and spontaneously as we're forgiven, as we've seen, as we've our minds slowly and very, very gently brought to truth. So we start to realise we're in a dream, we start to see the actors on the stage, we start to see that the script is written, maybe we've had some experiences of deja vu, we've had some mystical sort of experiences. Everyone has their own journey and sees it. We all go through fear, apparently. Most minds go through fear as the unsettling happens. As we release, as we realise what the ego thought system, as we come to really see it for what it is. So we're all in different places, but well, if you're dedicated and committed into mind training, mind watching, and asking the Holy Spirit to help you with something, it doesn't matter what it is. It can even be that, Holy Spirit, I don't know how to get in touch with you. I don't know what your voice is. Can you please reveal yourself more? Oh, and you might feel intuitively in that moment, I feel that I need to meditate more and feel like I need to quieten my mind, because the voice for the Holy Spirit, when you're in the ego mind, which is all very overwhelming in your mind, you might need to do quite a bit of meditation to start with, to drop below those thoughts. And then you'll start to become just aware of it's not a voice as such, it's like an intuition or a knowing, and it's your thoughts and your voice, but it feels differently. It's sort of something even that might just say to you, give you some sort of direction about how to respond to someone, or how to where to go and what to do. But as we're learning, we have to develop this trust, and this can take time. So we just allow ourselves we allow ourselves, we just give ourselves time. We don't put, I need to awaken by the Christmas of 2018. We just say, I devote my life, while I'm here, I devote my life to forgiveness. And if I awaken, that'd be lovely. But if I don't, I'm going to devote my life to the undoing of the false mind. And that's all you need to do. Devote yourself to undoing the false, and the truth will just spontaneously come into your mind. You don't have to get to peace. Peace will arrive. Peace will come into your mind as you let go of the false beliefs and the false thoughts about who you are and who everyone else is. So I'm reading from the correction of error. So if you can imagine you've got a child that's on drugs and you're very fearful around what will happen. So this is Jesus now, and he says, the alertness of the ego to the errors which other egos make is not the kind of vigilance which the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. Right. So I am speaking from direct experience of someone in my life that had a very bad drug addiction, and it was impossible. I tried everything, and I decided to do exactly what Jesus was telling me, because I'd given up knowing. And so these teachings are spread all throughout the course, but it's the same teaching in many different ways. So the alertness of the ego to the errors which other egos make is not the kind of vigilance which the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. So when we have a child that we think isn't performing or isn't doing what we think they should do, we become alert of the errors of other egos. So we're looking at our child as a body rather than pure spirit. and we're becoming more and more alert to the errors of their ego. And this is where this is the suffering, and we're really in this suffering. And I was in suffering for many, many years, being alert to the errors of my child's ego. Egos are critical in terms of the kind of sense they stand for. They understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. Now, what that means is that because this is a world where most minds are in ego, there's not very many awakened minds that are going to give you a different point of view about. So all the other egos join together and they say, yes, this makes sense. They say you should be alert to the errors of the ego. So if you were to say to someone else who was in their ego, my child, took drugs last night and stole a car and crashed it, that other ego would say, that's terrible, and it would seem to make sense, the joining of those two minds, to look at the ego and condemn it and judge it as bad. So egos are critical. So they're critical of what's been going on. So say the drug addict or the particular your child has done something, you get critical of it. So your ego judges it, it criticises what they've done, and the other egos or your ego says that that makes sense, that you should be critical. And to the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. So when you're judging your child in the normal ego sense, that it sends as normal, to the Holy Spirit, this is the right-minded thinking, that makes no sense at all. So everything that you ever think about your child and what they're drug taking never ever makes sense to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit would never ever think like that. So we're trying to get from ego thinking to fully embrace the Holy Spirit's thinking system. And as I said, I'm just going to be talking about one particular relationship, but it's across the board. But this is really good because I know in myself, when I had this situation going on in my life, it probably would have been really helpful to hear some sort of teaching that I'm doing today and the other teaching that I've done, because you do feel as an ego that it's different. And it's not different, but it just can be helpful to have this spoken to you directly about your relationship with your child. To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. So when your child, say your child is taking drugs and messing up and doing things and maybe even getting in trouble with the police, to the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors. And all other egos would agree with that. They would, you would get your other people saying, now you need to point out to him or her, and you need to say this, and it is kind and right and good to point these things out. So this is how the egos join together. And we're going beyond that. We're going to be doing something very different. We're going to be coming from a completely different way. But this is what we've got to see first, is how the ego responds to these situations. And the only reason why you would be interested in a talk like this is if you've come to see that nothing you ever do from the ego ever works. You will come to see that every time you come from the ego, nothing ever will change your child or you, and your relationship will get really strained, and it's a nightmare. You'll be living in a nightmare, and there is a way out. And the really good thing is that this is the way out. It's a very practical, but you have to use it. And I chose to use this, and it was very, very helpful. So to the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. So yes, I did that for years. I pointed out all the errors that my child was doing, and I thought that it was good, and that was a good parent, and the loving parent would point out the errors to their child. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is totally unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Errors are the ego, and correction of errors of any kind lies solely in the relinquishment of the ego. When you correct a brother, you are telling him he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain that if he is speaking from the ego, he will be making no sense. But your task is still to tell him he is right. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly, because he needs correction at another level, since his error is at another level. He is still right because he is a son of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does. So this is the way to freedom for yourself and for your child, and believe me, this will really, really help your child. So he says here, when you correct a brother, you are telling him he is wrong. And then further down, he says, your child is always right. So there's two levels here. So how to actually be with your child when they're because what's happening is that the reason why people take drugs is because they're fueled by guilt. And they take drugs to try to get away from the guilt in their mind, which is their ego mind. They try to subdue it, and just for a time, they can be free of that guilt. And then when they become, the drugs wear off, the guilt comes back in, and not only that guilt, but more guilt, because they feel guilty for taking the drugs, as well as the guilt that they already had. So the ego mind builds up this massive amount of guilt. And when you come in and try to correct someone that is living in hell, like their mind is in hell, when you come in and try to correct them, you're laying, all they hear is, I'm guilty, I'm bad, I'm this terrible, awful, guilty person, and I've let my parents down. And so Jesus is asking us here not to tell our child that they're wrong. And usually when you're with somebody that's heavily on drugs, they don't make any sense, but you don't respond to what they say. And it takes a bit of practice to do this, but it can be very helpful. So he says if he's speaking from the ego, he will be making no sense. And most people speak from the ego, so but let's just focus on this for now. Your task is still to tell him he is right. So you don't actually say it verbally, you just hold in your mind. So this is the sort of forgiveness that I will not respond to anything the ego is saying as truth. So if my child was on drugs and he was just saying, you know, there's a gang out to get me, or the police are after me, or sometimes you might hear that they think the government has bugged their phones, or they've got bugs in their room, or something like that. You never respond to those things directly to counteract them, because otherwise you're counteracting something that's making no sense. But your task is to tell him he is right, not to say, oh, you're right, in terms of the level of where he's at. You're coming to that he is right as who he truly is. So it's just sitting with that and not responding to it, not responding to the ego. So his ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does. So even though we might see the ego doing things that are wrong, saying things that are wrong, we as miracle workers, who we're our parents, but we're going to be actually performing a miracle with our child here, we as miracle workers do not respond to that. So we don't say, that's ridiculous, that's not true, you need to change this, you need to get off drugs, you need to stop taking drugs, you need this. We stop lecturing, we stop trying to fix them, we stop trying to change them, we stop trying to offer advice, we stop enabling them. Because what happens is when you respond to your child from fear, it never ever works. So your fear is the ego. So your ego is responding to their ego, and that's where the big suffering comes in. If you point out the errors of his ego, you must be seeing him through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. This must be true if there is no communication at all between the ego and the Holy Spirit. The ego makes no sense, and the Holy Spirit does not attempt to understand anything that arises from it. So, so anything your child says to you from the ego will make no sense, and we're asking not to point out his errors of his ego. So never, ever, ever point out any errors of his ego, because otherwise you're seeing through your ego and it won't work. Since he does not, this is the Holy Spirit, so the Holy Spirit doesn't attempt to understand anything that arises from the ego. So the Holy Spirit, your right mind, will not try to understand anything, and he doesn't judge it, knowing that nothing it engenders means anything. So literally the Holy Spirit, we invite the Holy Spirit in. So if you go to talk to your child or be with your child in any way or speak to them on the phone, invite the Holy Spirit in and say, be my right mind, decide for me. When you react at all to errors, you are not listening to the Holy Spirit. He has merely disregarded them, as in the Holy Spirit has merely disregarded all errors. And if you attend to them, in other words, respond to them, you are not hearing him. So you can't hear the Holy Spirit if you're going to be in your ego, seeing his ego and responding to it. And I tell you what, it's a horrible situation when you're with somebody that's in a lot of pain in their ego, and then you come from your ego. So two egos battling it out. It's an awful situation. It's hell. If you do not hear him, if you do not hear the Holy Spirit, you are listening to your ego and making as little sense as the brother whose errors you perceive. So literally, Jesus is saying that when we sit with someone that is really in their ego, we're making as little sense. So every time you try to offer correction from your ego to another ego, you're literally making no sense. You're not doing anything. This cannot be correction, but it is more than merely lack of correction for him. It is the giving up of correction in yourself. Let me just read that again. But it is more than merely lack of correction for him. It is the giving up of correction in yourself. Right, so it's not only that you're not helping your child, but you're actually not asking for correction for yourself. So as a miracle worker is someone that holds the truth and then is able to shine that light into someone else's mind so that they can get a glimpse of truth as well. And it comes from love, it comes from universal, pure, divine love, and it shines that, it sees the child as who they truly are, and it looks past everything that the ego is saying. It doesn't even notice it. It's purely shining the light, and that's that. Initially, we need to listen to the Holy Spirit, the right-minded thought system that's going to help us with our relationship with our child. When a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity in him. All right, so we're going to be looking past all the insanity so we're asking not to see the ego, not to see the insanity, but actually perceive the sanity in him. If you perceive his errors and accept them, you are accepting yours. So this is when you're perceiving the ego, and the errors, and accept them, you're accepting your errors. So you're literally, it's basically, it's not helpful for you or your child, because we're really here, we're dedicated to our spiritual path, and we need to know what we're doing wrong, because we don't understand initially what we're even doing wrong. We're really wanting a way out, and we need to first understand what it is that's not helpful, and then get the correction and understand what is helpful. So we have to give up what's not helpful and go, okay, there's another way, there is a better way. If you want to give yours, which is, if you want to give yours over to the Holy Spirit, you must do this with his. So this is when you perceive the Holy Spirit in his mind, you're activating your Holy Spirit right mind. Unless this becomes the one way in which you handle all errors, you cannot understand how all errors are undone. How is this different from telling you that what you teach, you learn? So as I ask the Holy Spirit to be in my mind and I listen to the Holy Spirit, I'm actually teaching my child that you have a right mind, that you can listen to and respond to others that you come in contact with. So this is how we're teaching. To be a miracle worker, all we need to do is activate correction. So we might initially, like your child that's on drugs, might see you responding constantly from your ego, and then they start to see you're responding to them differently from the right-minded thought system. And this is what you're teaching. You're teaching your child in that sense. You don't have to say, hey, I'm coming from my right mind and I want to teach you this. You're teaching by demonstrating it. So what I did was I started to ask Jesus to be in my mind and to help me perceive my child differently. And so I started to constantly speak to who that child really was, rather than use the ego. And it was very helpful for me, and I didn't realise till later on that that child was learning from what I was doing. They were taking note and would go on to then actually embrace their own spiritual path, and had learnt through what I was actually doing. So that part of it was really beautiful to see. And now that child, my child, is actually a really wonderful spiritual teacher, has awakened to the love within, and her partner has awakened, and they're really beautiful and helpful. They're just being so helpful to so many people around them. So many minds have got so much clarity, And it all came from me enacting this teaching for myself to see that I just decided there had to be a better way, and everything I had done hadn't worked, and I didn't even realise that I was coming from the ego. And as it says, the ego says, as I read at the beginning, the ego says that it is kind and right and good to point out errors. And that's what I had been doing, because that's what I believed was the way to help my child. And it's not. It doesn't work. I saw that it didn't work. So when we come to another way, we ask the Holy Spirit, and this is what Jesus is giving us now. He's asking us that when a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity in him. So he's telling us this is the only way to heal your child, is to perceive the sanity in him, the innocence, the guiltlessness, the perfection of who he truly is, the beautiful Christ self, the just seeing the innocence. So I usually share here when it can be really difficult if you're in a situation and you've got a child on drugs and you're doing everything you can and you're coming from your ego, trying to help. And it does come from love. We do love our children and we do want to help. But when we come from our ego and we think by pointing out their errors is going to help them, it doesn't help. All it does is lay more guilt on them, and it doesn't alleviate, it doesn't help bring any truth to your mind or their mind, and you're stuck in an ego dance with them. So how to perceive the innocence of your child, you might like to think about when they were a really little child, and you know, when you look at a little 2-year-old that's maybe playing outside with a little bucket and spade, or busy in a little sand pit, and they're very innocent, they're inquisitive and curious, and their children are in their in their nature, they're quite, that's why we do, you know, Jesus says, become like little children, become the innocents, because I always have a little frog in my throat. Croak, croak. Lots of frogs in the pond today. So if you bring to your mind when your child was really young and innocent, and bring in some memories, because what we're going to do is we're going to drag this part of the past, because this is anything that ego makes, we're going to use to awaken. So we're going to use this aspect of our mind that really connected into the beautiful innocence of our child. And then we're going to put that across to them now. So we're going to overlook all the, checking up the time because it's, so we're going to overlook what the body does and says, which is what the ego is saying. We're going to look past the insanity, and we're going to speak to that innocence in the child. So we're going to start perceiving the sanity in him. How is this different from telling you that what you teach, you learn? So as we're doing this, as we're actually seeing the sanity in our child, we're actually waking up to the sanity of our own mind, because Jesus tells us that as I see my brother, I see myself. So if I'm using my ego to perceive my brother's ego, the only way out is to use the right mind to see the truth in him. And as I do that, there's so many benefits to this, unbelievable benefits. Hi, Hal. Just to let you know, Hal, that I'm recording this. I'm going to be putting it up on my YouTube channel, so not sure whether you'd like to take your video off. Your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you are condemning yourself. So how is this different from telling you that your brother is as right as you are? So your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you're condemning yourself. So everything we think about someone else is a message that our self is getting to us. It's an interesting thing, because we've got to really understand the ramifications of talking to the ego, using our ego to see egos, and using this teaching, because it's like a holographic. It has so many benefits, absolutely so many benefits. It's waking us up, because as I'm seeing the truth in my child, the innocence and the guiltlessness and the perfection of who they truly are, and I'm looking past what he's saying and doing, and as I'm seeing that, I'm waking up to my true nature, and I'm helping and I'm shining the light into his mind, and I'm actually helping that mind awaken by I'm giving them a lesson on how to be correct, how to perceive correctly. So there's so many dynamics to this teaching. It's helping, and it helps all minds, because all minds are connected. So there's another dynamic that's on another level of mind that we're not aware of. So this is such a dynamic teaching. So don't underestimate, if you want to put this teaching into practice, don't underestimate the amazing benefits of it. You cannot correct yourself. It is possible then for you. Is it possible then for you to correct another? So in other words, the ego in your mind cannot correct the ego, and then how in your ego mind can you correct your brother? So he's really saying this is madness, this is insanity. If you use the ego mind to try to correct ego, that's why it's just, you can do this for years like I did, and then you just got to say, I give up, I want another way. But you can see him truly, because it is possible for you to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change him, but merely to accept him as he is. This is beautiful. This is the healing. This is the teaching. So I am not going to correct my child. I'm not going to correct. I'm not going to correct. You just keep saying this. I'm not going to fix. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to try to correct, because the ego will keep telling you that you need to correct them, that they need to change, that they need to be better. We're coming from another level that's going to see our child as who they truly are. We're going to just see him as he is. And in the seeing of him as he is the healing. Now, I'd like you to think of a time when you've been very depressed or very sad or very anxious, and how have you ever had an experience of someone trying to help or fix or correct you, and how it's been very unhelpful? And maybe you can think of another time where someone has come to you and just sat with you. They've not tried to fix or change or correct you, and they've just sat with you and just loved you, and maybe just done something nice for you and said, how can I help you? What could I do to, could I make you a meal? Or could I take you shopping? They're not trying to fix, correct or help. They're literally, they may be just in a beautiful space, but if you're actually to have someone awakened around you, they're going to see you exactly as you are. They're not going to, why would you want to help, fix or correct the perfect, innocent Christ? And that's what we're being asked to see. So if you're seeing truly, if you're seeing your child as they are, there's not one tiny bit of you that would want to correct them. And when you see them as they truly are, that is the healing. Because I'll tell you what, when you're on the receiving end of it, it's the most healing thing to have someone tell you how beautiful and perfect and gorgeous you are. And that's what I started saying to my child. I just said, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're so perfect. Oh, you're just so innocent and lovely. So perfect. I kept telling my child, yeah, oh my goodness. All I could see in that moment, my mind awakened to the truth. And it was so beautiful. And it shone something into her mind. She had been messaging me that she was lost. And it was really just asking, you know, she wasn't asking me to correct her errors, her ego. She was asking, can someone see me truly? A call for love, calling for this universal love. Can you love me for who I am? Can you overlook my ego and my guilt and all these things I'm doing and saying? And can you just see me? And this is what Jesus is telling us. These are his instructions. They're not Cate's instructions. I followed what these instructions were, and I'm a testimony that they work. And that's really all I'm here to say is I just did what Jesus is saying here, what an awakened Christ mind is giving us, saying, you know, turn to me, turn to another way. So to perceive errors in anyone and react to them as if they are real is to make them real to you. Hang on, I'm just going to back up a little bit. I think I've missed a few sentences here. Got to keep an eye on the time as well. But you can see him truly because it is possible for you to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change him, but merely to accept him as he is. Okay, this is it. So accept him as he is. He is innocent. He is sane. He is guiltless. All through the course, he's saying, can you see your brother as innocent? Can you see the guiltlessness? Can you see the perfection? His errors do not come from the truth that is in him, and only this truth is yours. His errors cannot change this and can have no effect at all on the truth in you. So this is another dynamic, that his errors, his ego cannot affect you. You have to hold tight in the truth in you. To perceive errors in anyone and react to them as if they were real is to make them real to you. You will not escape paying the price for this, not because you are being punished for it, but because you are following the wrong guide. You're following the ego, the wrong guide, and you will lose your way. Your brother's errors are not of him. He's not an ego. He's the pure Christ. But he's just caught up like you are, caught up in your ego mind, in error. Your brother's errors are not of him any more than yours are of you. Accept his errors as real, and you have attacked yourself. If you would find your way and keep it, see only truth beside you, for you walk together. The Holy Spirit in you forgives all things in you and your brother. His errors are forgiven with yours. Atonement is no more separate than love. It cannot be separate because it comes from love. Any attempt you make to correct a brother means that you believe correction by you is possible, and this can only be the arrogance of the ego. Correction is of God, who does not know of arrogance. The Holy Spirit forgives everything because God created everything. Do not undertake his function, or you will forget yours. Accept only the function of healing in time, because that is what time is for. God gave you the function to create in eternity. You do not need to learn this, but you do need to learn to want this. And for this, all learning was made. This is the Holy Spirit's good use of an ability which you do not need, but which you have made. Give it to him. You do not know how to use it. He will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation by learning how to look on everything without it. condemnation will then not be real to you, and all your errors will be forgiven. So just that's, once again, section 9, chapter 9, section 3, the correction of error. And I've specifically done this talk as a parent of a drug addict or an alcoholic or someone. So this can be used. You can use it with anyone, but somehow as parents we have this responsibility, we have this idea, and society, the ego's laws all join together and say that this is your parental role to correct and point out the errors of your child. So we seem to accept this a little bit more as parents. So I hope you've enjoyed this video in put in this way and taken the teaching of Jesus as a direct pointer to how to undo this idea and how to respond to your child through correct perception. And I am the living truth that this works, and that I've been absolutely blessed. I just can't tell you the gratitude that I have that this teaching is in my life, because I would still be coming from my ego to try to fix and correct a beautiful child that didn't need and wasn't asking for it. She was calling for love. She was calling for that one person in her life to just see her as she was. And as I said before, if you can think of a time when someone has just done that for you, you can feel how healing it is, how beautiful it is. So I'm witnessing to you now, everyone that's here. I'm witnessing to who you truly are. And I'm my mind awakened to that's all that says here anyway. There's only the Christ, and that's all I see now. I can't really, I see bodies, but I don't sort of have any, they're quite, it's quite out of my awareness. I'm only ever speaking to the beautiful, innocent Christ in everyone I meet. So that's been healed. I've had healed perception. So I'd like to thank everyone that's here, and thanks, Regina. It's a wonderful, Zoom seems to be working well, and I'll say goodbye. So I love you, and I bless you, and I honour you, and thank you for being here. So thanks, Regina. And I will stop this recording.